We have some new number concerning the territory controlled by ISIS. So NDTV, a media from India, is reporting ISIS lost nearly 90% of territory seized on 2014 US-led coalition. The ISIS group has lost nearly 90% of territory it controlled in 2014 when it proclaimed a caliphate straddling Iraq and Syria, the US-led coalition said Tuesday. The announcement by the coalition, which has carried out thousands of air strikes against the jihadists and deployed advisors in both countries, came on the day of its third anniversary, and as the Kurdish Arab Force, its support captured ISIS once-time bastion of Raqqa. So our partners have removed ISIS from 87% of territory they once held and liberated over 6.5 million people, coalition spokesman Rayal Dillon said on social media using another acronym for ISIS. So that is true. By example, ISIS lost 3 or 4 days ago Al-Mayadin, which was basically their other capital, because once Raqqa was totally besieged, they decided to move their infrastructure to Al-Mayadin, and so recently the Syrian Arab Army have taken Al-Mayadin, and they also have lose Deir ez-Zor. Deir ez-Zor was a city totally besieged by ISIS since 2014. So that is very good that the Syrian army was able to break the siege. And now apparently the Syrian Arab army is have crossed the Euphrates, and they are very close to the Al-Umar oil field, which is oil field that the Kurds, the Syrian Democratic Force, and the government want to take control of, because they are very powerful oil field, and basically ISIS is only controlling the Deir ez-Zor province, and once they have lost the Deir ez-Zor province, that's over, they're finished, and they control only half of the Deir ez-Zor province they lose half in 2 months. So that is very good, and I think that before the end of the year, I think it's likely that Iraq and or Syria will be totally ISIS free. That's what the Prime Minister of Iraq said. He said that he hoped that before the end of the year, his territory will be free from ISIS. And I think it's possible, but in Iraq that's complicated because the government is fighting against the Kurds, because they want to retake some position that they have lost against ISIS. So that's very complicated because well, if they're fighting on 2 fronts, that is much more complicated to fighting against ISIS, and now the Kurds, but now that they finished the operation against Raqqa, the former ISIS capital, they will be heading toward Deir ez-Zor province in the east, because they have to take the Al-Umar oil field, and they want to take the control of the border with Iraq, which is very important. And yeah, that's it. The Syrian government have really make a good job, and the Kurd also was very good in taking the fight against ISIS. But the problem is that ISIS is not only in Iraq and Syria, they are also in Afghanistan, where the branch is called Khorasan, I think. and they are also in Nigeria. Like the group Boko Haram have swear allegiance to ISIS, so they are in Nigeria. They also are in Egypt, in the Sinai. They very recently they lost Marawi, which is a city in Philippines, which have hundreds of thousands of people, and it come out of nowhere. Like nobody expecting ISIS to take a city in Philippines because it's very far away, and nobody expecting that. So yeah, and they also are in Libya because the country is in chaos, and that's a good way for ISIS to be here because in when a country is in chaos, then ISIS usually they rise out of the chaos because the country is a failed state, so they can take over of the country. That's what happened in Iraq after the US overthrew Saddam. Al Qaeda in Iraq wasn't here before Saddam was overthrown. So yeah, that will be more complicated because ISIS is also in a lot of other countries. And the ISIS militants that are in Syria and Iraq, they will very likely flee to other countries like Yemen. ISIS is in Yemen. They could also flee to Afghanistan and or Libya. So they have a lot of possibility. And I think that is a bad news for those countries because they are not able to defeat terrorism. Like Iraq have been fighting terrorism for decades, and they are still here. Like Al Qaeda in Iraq is controlling vast swaths of territory in the east of Yemen, and ISIS is only controlling a tiny amount in the middle of Yemen, basically. And they're also in Afghanistan. And I recently read somewhere that ISIS and the Taliban have made a peace deal, basically like an alliance. I'm not sure if that's true, but that's very scary. That's very scary.